Welcome to our channel, where we bring you enchanting bedtime stories to transport you beyond the ordinary. This is the tale of Elliot in the Library of Forgotten Dreams, a story of magic, wonder, and the power of creativity. Before we begin our story, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. We'd love to hear from you. Stay with us till the very end and let your mind wander through the wonders of this magical world. Now, close your eyes, relax, and let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The Whispering Wind. Elliot had long forgotten the feeling of purpose. His days stretched endlessly, one blending into the next, like ink bleeding across damp paper. He had once been a dreamer, someone who painted landscapes on canvas and wove stories into color. But time had a way of dulling even the brightest hues. And now his life was a muted shade of its former self. On this particular evening, he found himself walking. He wasn't sure why or where he was going. He had simply followed the road as it wound through mist-laden hills, his feet crunching on gravel softened by twilight. The air smelled of damp earth and distant rain, and a hush had settled over the valley, as if the world itself was waiting. Then he heard it, a whisper. It was faint, like a breath against his ear, yet carried an undeniable pull. Elliot paused, scanning the rolling hills and darkened tree line. The wind had picked up slightly, curling around him with an almost knowing touch. There it was again, a whisper, not quite words, yet beckoning him forward. He hesitated. Logic told him to ignore it, to keep walking until he reached the next town. But something deeper, something long buried beneath the weight of routine, urged him to follow. Without fully understanding why, he stepped off the road and into the misty field beyond. The further he walked, the thicker the mist became, swirling at his feet like restless spirits. The trees ahead loomed taller, their silhouettes stretching into the dimming sky. Then, through the veil of silver fog, he saw it, a building nestled between the trees. Its presence, both unexpected and inevitable. It was a library, not the kind one found in cities, with towering shelves and fluorescent lights. But something older, something that had existed beyond time. The architecture was strange, yet familiar, its wooden frame adorned with intricate carvings that shifted when he looked too closely. A golden plaque above the heavy double doors bore an inscription, "The Library of Forgotten Dreams." Elliot's heart gave a peculiar lurch. He had never heard of this place, never seen it on any map, and yet, standing before it, he felt as though he had been here before, as if he had once known this place and simply forgotten. The doors creaked open as if expecting him. Warmth spilled out, carrying the scent of aged parchment, candle wax, and something faintly floral, like the lingering breath of a memory. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The library was vast, stretching endlessly in all directions. Tall bookshelves loomed, packed with tomes, bound and worn. Leather, their spines shimmering faintly under the golden glow of lanterns. The air hummed with something alive, a quiet energy that stirred the edges of his consciousness. A voice, soft yet commanding, broke the silence. "Welcome, Elliot." He turned sharply. A woman stood at the base of a spiral staircase, watching him with eyes the color of moonlight. She was draped in deep blue robes that shimmered like the night sky. Her presence, both ethereal and grounded. "How do you know my name?" he asked. The woman tilted her head, offering a knowing smile. "'Cause your story is here." Elliot frowned, his gaze sweeping over the endless shelves. "What is this place?" "The Library of Forgotten Dreams," she repeated, stepping closer. "A place where lost aspirations, abandoned hopes, and dreams left to wither are kept." She reached for a nearby shelf, running her fingers along the spines until she found what she was looking for. With practiced ease, she plucked a book and handed it to him. His name was embossed on the cover in delicate gold script. Elliot's fingers tightened around the book. He felt the weight of it, both physical and something more, a quiet echo of something he had once known. He swallowed hard before finally opening it. Ink bled across the pages as if being rewritten before his eyes. He saw himself as a child, sitting by a window, sketching fantastical worlds with charcoal-stained hands. He saw himself as a teenager, standing in front of a blank canvas, his heart thrumming with possibility. And then he saw himself older, the colors fading, the brush abandoned, the pages of his dreams closing one by one. His breath hitched. "This is a record," the woman said gently, "of what you once wished for and what you let go." Elliot closed the book with trembling hands. The weight in his chest was unbearable, the realization sinking deep. "Why?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Why keep these? Why preserve what's already lost?" The woman's expression softened. "Because dreams never truly disappear, Elliot. They wait." A hush settled between them, thick with unspoken truths. The library seemed to breathe, the lanterns flickering as if in agreement. "Who are you?" he finally asked. "I am Celine," she answered, dipping her head. "The keeper of lost stories." Elliot looked down at the book in his hands, the golden letters gleaming under the warm light. The whispering wind outside had quieted, but something within him stirred. A long-forgotten dream was awakening, and the library was waiting for him to remember. For a long moment, he simply stood there, the weight of realization pressing into his chest. He thought of the countless nights he had spent feeling hollow, wondering why life had become a series of days without meaning. He had told himself he was too old to dream, that the time for chasing wonder had long passed. But now, standing within these walls, he wasn't so sure. "Can I read more?" he asked hesitantly, looking up at Celine. She smiled, a knowing glint in her moonlit eyes. "You may read as much as you wish. But know this, some dreams are ready to be reclaimed, while others are content to remain in the past. Elliot traced his fingers over the book's cover, his mind a whirl of forgotten desires and newfound possibility. The library was vast, filled with stories untold and memories waiting to be rediscovered. And for the first time in a long while, he wanted to know more. He took a deep breath and stepped further inside. Chapter 2: Echoes of the Unwritten. Elliot wandered deeper into the library, his fingers tracing the spines of books that hummed beneath his touch. Every volume seemed to breathe, shifting under his fingertips as though eager to be read. Night here was thick, not with dust, but with something intangible and energy that pulsed in the quiet. A heartbeat beneath the hush of the lantern-lit halls. Celine walked beside him in silence, her robes whispering against the stone floor. She did not guide him, nor did she need to. The library had its own will, its own sense of direction, and Elliot could feel it leading him, pulling him toward something unseen at last. They arrived at a small alcove where an ornate reading desk sat beneath an arched window. As moonlight streamed through the glass, illuminating the book in his hands. "What happens if I read it?" Elliot asked, running his palm over the golden letters embossed on the cover. Celine folded her hands before her. "That depends. Some books are meant to be read. Others are meant to be rewritten." Elliot hesitated. "Rewritten?" She nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the lantern glow. "Some dreams fade, Elliot, but they do not die. They merely sleep, waiting for the right hands to turn their pages once more." The words stirred something deep within him, a forgotten yearning. Slowly, he opened the book. The pages were not filled with the tiny lines of printed text, but with swirling ink that moved like smoke, shifting and reforming before his eyes. As he stared, the ink settled, revealing a scene he had not thought of in years. He saw himself as a young man, standing at the threshold of a great decision. He had been given an opportunity, once a scholarship to an art school across the country. He remembered the way his heart had leaped at the acceptance letter, the way he had traced the embossed seal with trembling fingers, and yet he had never gone. He had let the letter sit on his desk until the deadline passed, drowning in the expectations of others, the fear of the unknown. He inhaled sharply, the weight of that moment pressing against his ribs. "I had forgotten," he whispered. Celine's voice was gentle. "Not forgotten. Set aside." Elliot turned the page. More memories unfurled, finished paintings abandoned in dusty corners. Ideas he had once scribbled onto napkins and lost in the shuffle of time. He saw glimpses of places he had longed to visit, stories he had wished to write, moments of joy that had been swallowed by routine. The pages were not a condemnation, nor were they filled with regret. They were echoes waiting to be heard. His throat tightened. What do I do with this? Celine extended her hand, and in her palm rested a quill. Its feathers shimmered like liquid silver, the ink at its tip glistening with an otherworldly glow. You're right, she said simply. Elliot stared at the quill, his fingers itching to take it. Rewrite my dreams, revive them, Celine corrected. Not all lost dreams are meant to be reclaimed, but some are merely waiting for you to believe in them again. He reached out, the quill cool and smooth in his grip. As he touched the tip to the page, the ink began to shift again, waiting for his hand to guide it. His mind swirled with possibility. Could he truly rewrite his story? Set? Too late to reclaim what had been lost. A deep breath steadied him. He placed the quill to the page and wrote the first word, and the library whispered in approval. The moment the quill met the paper, the ink responded as if alive, stretching out in delicate tendrils, forming words he hadn't even consciously thought of yet. It was as though his heart was speaking directly to the page, bypassing doubt and hesitation. As he wrote, the air around him thickened with an almost electric energy, and for the first time in years, he felt a true sense of purpose. Celine stepped back, watching quietly as Elliot continued. The words poured from him, desires long buried, paths he had once abandoned. He wrote about the art school, the paintings he had imagined but never created, the adventures he had dreamt of but never pursued. And as he did, something miraculous happened. The ink did not simply dry on the page. It moved, forming vivid images, shifting like reflections on the surface of a still pond. One painting, the landscape of misty mountains bathed in an ethereal, golden light, lifted off the page slightly, its colors deepening as though it existed between reality and illusion. Elliot stared, breath caught in his throat. It was one of his old ideas, a vision he had once yearned to bring to life on canvas. He reached out a hesitant hand. The image flickered, but did not vanish. Instead, it expanded, the golden mist curling outward, as though inviting him to step forward. His fingers grazed the edges, and for a split second, he felt warmth, a sensation so real, so tangible. It was as if he was standing inside the painting itself. He pulled his hand back, heart pounding. This isn't possible, he murmured. Selena's lips curved into a knowing smile. What is possibility, if not a dream waiting to be believed? Elliot swallowed hard. The room around him still pulsed, with the energy of creation, of lost dreams stirring awake. He had spent years convincing himself that the time for dreaming had passed him by. But here, in this strange, mystical library, time seemed irrelevant. He met Celine's gaze. If I keep writing, will these dreams become real? She tilted her head slightly, considering his words. Perhaps not in the way you expect. Every story written shapes the world in some way. And some, she gestured toward the shifting ink on the page, have more power than others. Elliot looked back down at his book, his hands steady now. The whispering energy of the library surrounded him, cradling him in its ancient, knowing embrace. He had a choice to make, and for the first time in years, he was ready to choose himself. The quill pressed to the page once more, and the ink blossomed beneath his touch, weaving the fabric of a new reality, one word at a time. Chapter 3. The Door Between Worlds. Elliot sat motionless at the grand wooden desk, his fingers curled lightly around the silver quill. The ink shimmered like liquid stardust, waiting for him to carve his thoughts into the waiting pages. The library around him seemed to breathe, the very walls pulsing with a quiet, unseen life force. The books lining the endless shelves whispered in hushed tones, their voices carried by the soft, unfelt breeze that lingered between the towering bookcases. The scene on the open page before him had settled into an image of painted doorway, standing alone in a misty field, its surface adorned with celestial symbols that pulsed softly, as if beckoning him closer. It was not something he had consciously imagined, yet here it was, unfolding from his own hand. Celine watched from the shadows, her ethereal presence blending with the ever-shifting light of the library. This door did not exist before you wrote. It, Elliot, she murmured, stepping forward. It is an invitation. Elliot swallowed, his pulse quickening. It's an invitation to what? Okay? To see what lies beyond your forgotten dreams. To walk through the threshold of what could have been and what may yet be. The ink on the page stirred again, and the doorway within the illustration pulsed with a faint golden glow. Then, something truly impossible happened. The golden light bled out of the page, expanding beyond the paper's edge and into the air before him. The mist swirled outward from the book, coiling like tendrils of smoke, and within moments, the door had formed in the space before him, real, solid, and waiting. Elliot pushed his chair back slowly, staring in awe. The door stood just a few feet away, tall and slightly ajar. A warmth emanated from the thin gap between its frame, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked earth and something else, something familiar yet unplaced. Abel, his heartbeat thundered in his ears. He turned to Celine, searching her face for an answer. Where does it lead? Only you can answer that, she replied, her silver eyes unreadable. But I will tell you this, wherever it leads, you once dreamed of going there. Elliot hesitated, only a moment longer before stepping forward. He reached out a hand and touched the wood of the door. It was warm beneath his fingertips, humming with quiet energy. He exhaled, placed his palm firmly against it, and pushed. A soft creak echoed through the library as the door swung open. Beyond it stretched a twilight landscape, unlike anything he had ever seen. A sky of deep indigos swirled with rivers of gold and violet, like a painting come to life. Rolling hills bathed in soft, silvery light, stretched toward the horizon, dotted with crystalline trees that shimmered as if dusted with frost. A narrow path led forward, winding through the dreamlike scenery. Elliot stepped across the threshold. The moment he did, a rush of warmth flooded through him, a deep sense of belonging that he could not explain. The ground beneath his feet felt firm, yet strangely weightless, as though he were walking on the surface of a memory. Celine followed, though she did not step beyond the threshold. Instead, she lingered in the doorway, watching with quiet reverence. This is the world of your forgotten dreams, Elliot. Every step you take here brings you closer to the pieces of yourself you left behind. He turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. His gaze landed on something in the distance of structure, partially hidden behind the trees, its edges gleaming faintly under the celestial sky. His chest tightened. He knew that place. Somehow, impossibly, he knew it. Without another word, he walked toward it. As he moved, the landscape shifted subtly, as if adjusting to his presence. The air carried whispers, fragments of old thoughts and aspirations that had long since faded from his waking mind. When he reached the structure, he realized it was an old Italian artist's studio. The doors were wide open, revealing canvases, paints, and sculptures in various stages of completion. A half-finished painting stood on an easel near the window, and the sight of it sent a shock through his system. It was one of his paintings, one he had never completed. Elliot approached it slowly, his hands trembling. He had started this piece years ago, a dreamscape he had envisioned in his youth, filled with floating lanterns and bridges of light. He had abandoned it when he convinced himself that art could never be more than a hobby, that responsibilities and practicality mattered more than creation. "I'd left this behind," he whispered. Celine's voice was soft. "Dreams do not die, Elliot. They wait." He turned to her, a storm of emotions swirling in his chest. "What am I supposed to do? Finish it?" His voice held a note of disbelief, but also something else, hope. She inclined her head. "Or begin anew. The choice is yours. But no, this once. You reclaim a dream. It will not wait to be forgotten again." Elliot looked back at the painting, at the brushes resting beside it, at the colors that still gleamed, untouched after all these years. He reached out, picked up a brush, and dipped it into the paint. The moment the bristles touched the canvas, the world around him seemed to pause, as if the very air recognized his decision. As he painted, the scene before him shifted and grew. The lanterns in the painting began to glow, and in the distance he heard the faint sound of music, soft, lilting, like the echoes of a forgotten melody. The atelier felt alive, breathing in time with him, and in that moment, Elliot understood. He was not just remembering his dreams, he was bringing them back to life. Chapter 4. The Keeper of Lost Moments. The brush in Elliot's hand felt lighter than he remembered. If it carried not just pigment, but possibility itself. The more he painted, the more the atelier around him breathed with unseen life. Lanterns within his painting began to flicker and sway, their golden light spilling beyond the canvas and casting a soft glow throughout the studio. The melody he had heard earlier grew clearer, wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. Was a tune he had once hummed as a child, something buried deep within him. Now, resurrected by his own hand, he exhaled, steadying himself. This place, ... it isn't just a memory, is it? Celine stepped closer, her expression unreadable, yet gentle. No, it is a sanctuary for the parts of yourself you've left behind. And within these walls, not all things remain forgotten. Elliot sat down, the brush, his gaze sweeping the atelier once more. His fingers grazed the edge of an unfinished sculpture. His sculpture is a fragment of an old ambition he had once cherished. The marble was smooth, cool to the touch, yet it seemed to vibrate with dormant potential, waiting to be carved into something meaningful. A wave of longing swelled in his chest. I always meant to finish this, he admitted, tracing the unfinished edges, but I let life get in the way. Celine nodded, her silver eyes shimmering in the lantern's glow. Time does not steal dreams, Elliot. It only buries them beneath layers of doubt and routine. But they never truly disappear. It is why you are here to unearth what was once yours. Before he could respond, a sound echoed through the open doors of the atelier, slow, rhythmic tapping. It was neither threatening nor hurried, but it carried a weight, a presence. Elliot turned toward the doorway, heart quickening as a figure emerged from the mist beyond the threshold. A man, draped in robes of deep indigo, stepped into the lantern light. His face was partially obscured by the shadows of his hood, but his presence was undeniable. In one hand, he carried an ornate staff, carved with constellations that shimmered faintly in the dim glow. His other hand rested against a thick, leather-bound tome strapped to his belt. Celine inclined her head slightly. "The keeper of lost moments," she murmured. The man stopped a few paces away, his voice deep and steady. "Elliot." Elliot's breath hitched. "You know my name?" The keeper gave a slow nod. "I know all who pass through these halls, for I am the one who safeguards what they have left behind." The words sent a shiver through Elliot. "What have I left behind?" The keeper extended a hand, and with it, the air between them wavered like ripples on the surface of a pond. A vision unfolded, scenes from Elliot's past, moments he had abandoned in the wake of responsibility. Late nights spent sketching by lamplight, pages of unfinished stories, their ink faded with time. Letters he had written but never sent. Dreams he had once dared to believe in but had let slip through his fingers. Elliot swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to forget them." The keeper's gaze remained steady. "Yet you did." But forgetting is not the same as losing, Elliot. That which is truly yours can always be reclaimed. Elliot looked at Celine, searching her expression. I take them back. What happens? She smiled softly. Okay, then they become part of you once more. The choice is yours. He turned back to the vision before him. His unfinished work, his abandoned passions, each one a thread in the tapestry of who he had once been. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward and reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the vision, warmth flooded through him, a quiet but profound recognition. The colors of his old paintings deepened, the ink of his forgotten stories darkened, and became whole once more. He felt it the return of something lost, something that had always been meant for him. The vision faded, but the feeling remained. The keeper watched in silence, then inclined his head. You are ready. Elliot met his gaze. Ready for what? The keeper lifted his staff, pointing toward the 8 layers open door. Beyond it, the landscape had changed. The rolling twilight hills had given way to something more defined, a pathway leading into the unknown, lined with glowing lanterns that flickered like guiding stars. To leave this place, the keeper said, and bring your reclaimed dreams with you. Elliot hesitated. I don't know what awaits me beyond that path. That is the beauty of it, Celine murmured. You are no longer confined by what has been. The future is yours to create. A deep breath steadied him. He turned back to the atelier one last time, taking in the sight of his unfinished works. But they no longer felt like relics of failure. They felt like beginnings. Something in the distance shifted, a ripple in the twilight, a distortion in the air. The keeper raised his staff, and a soft hum filled the space around them. The lanterns outside the atelier flickered, responding to the unseen energy that pulsed through the land. Elliot felt the change, a subtle but undeniable shift, as if the very fabric of the dreamscape recognized his choice. A gust of wind whispered through the open door, carrying the scent of possibility, fresh parchment, unshaped clay, wet paint drying in golden light. This was the scent of creation, of beginnings. He stepped toward the open door. The moment he crossed the threshold, sensation washed over him, a feeling of weightlessness, of being unshackled from the past. The lantern-lit path stretched before him, welcoming him forward. Celine's voice echoed softly behind him. Go, Elliot, and this time, do not let your dreams sleep for too long. With one last glance back, Elliot stepped forward, and the library whispered in approval. Chapter 5. The Bridge of Echoes. Elliot's footsteps were soundless as he walked the lantern-lit path. The air shimmered with an almost imperceptible hum, as though the space itself was alive, breathing in tandem with his own hesitant movements. The scent of parchment and ink had faded, replaced by something crisper, like the air before a storm, charged with the weight of unspoken things. Ahead, the path twisted into a bridge that seemed woven from strands of silver light. March over an expanse that had no bottom, a vast and unknowable void that did not frighten him, but rather filled him with a peculiar sense of peace. He could not see where the bridge led, but something in him knew it was the only way forward. Celine walked beside him, her presence both reassuring and enigmatic. "This is the bridge of echoes," she said, her voice quiet yet resonant. "It is where past and present intertwine. Here, you will hear the voices of the selves you have left behind. You must listen." Elliot hesitated at the bridge's entrance, his fingers grazing the silvery railing that hummed at his touch. "And if I don't want to hear them?" Selena's silver eyes met his. "Then you will never truly move forward." A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying whispers that seemed to rise from the void below. They were not threatening, nor were they entirely clear. Fragments of laughter, hushed confessions, distant cries of frustration and longing. Elliot took a breath and stepped onto the bridge at once. The echoes grew stronger, a boy's voice, eager and filled with wonder. "One day, I'll paint something that people will never forget." It's the voice of a younger man, uncertain but yearning. "Maybe I should just be practical. Art doesn't pay the bills." Another voice, weary and resigned. "It's too late. I wouldn't even know where to start anymore." Elliot clenched his fists as he walked, the whispers curling around him like tendrils of mist. They were pieces of himself, fragments of thought he had once let slip away. Some were hopeful, others burdened by doubt and regret. A new voice arose, one that made him stop mid-step. "You promised you wouldn't give up." It was his mother's voice, a memory unfurled before him, playing out like a dream. He was young, no older than 10, sitting cross-legged on the floor of their small apartment. His mother knelt beside him, watching as he sketched with fierce concentration. "Don't stop," she had said, her voice warm with encouragement. "Whatever happens, Elliot, promise me you won't stop creating." His chest tightened. He had promised her, okay, and yet, somewhere along the way, he had broken that promise, not just to her, but to himself. He had let the world's expectations drown out his own desires. A single tear traced a path down his cheek as the vision faded. The whispers around him softened, as if acknowledging his realization. He took another step forward, then another. With each step, the bridge grew brighter, as if his resolve was weaving it into solidity. The echoes no longer pulled at him. They simply existed, acknowledged, but not defining. He had heard them. He had faced them, and now he could move beyond them. The far side of the bridge came into view, framed by towering archways made of obsidian and lined with iridescent runes. Beyond it lay something new, something waiting to be discovered. Celine stood beside him. "Once more, you have done what many fear to do," she said. "You have faced yourself." Elliot exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in years. what happens now? A knowing smile touched Celine's lips. Now you've stepped forward. But as Elliot lifted his foot to cross the final threshold, the bridge trembled. A new whisper, stronger than the others, rose from below. It was not a past voice, it was his own, from this very moment. Am I truly ready? The air shimmered, as the bridge itself seemed to respond. The strands of silver light twisted, forming new paths, branching into the unknown. Oh, the void beneath them swirled, revealing glimpses of roads not taken, of choices left unexplored. Celine watched him carefully. The bridge does not lead to one future alone. It is shaped by your choices. Elliot hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. He had come this far, reclaimed what he had lost, but what lay ahead was still unwritten. A teen, the fear of the unknown, stirred within him, but beneath it was something stronger. Hope. He lifted his gaze and stepped onto the final plank. The echoes behind him faded, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat, steady and sure. As he crossed the threshold, the bridge of silver light dissolved behind him, sealing away the past. The path ahead was dark, but he no longer feared it. For the first time in years, Elliot was ready to create something new. Chapter 6. The Eternal Quill. As Elliot stepped forward beyond the fading bridge, the air around him thickened with the weight of unspoken possibilities. The obsidian archway ahead pulsed with iridescent light, its runes shifting like liquid stars, whispering in a language older than time itself. He placed his palm against the stone, and the doorway responded with a deep, resonant hum. Beyond the arch lay a vast chamber, unlike anything he had seen before. The walls stretched into infinity, lined with towering bookshelves that moved of their own accord, shifting and gliding like living beings. Each book glowed faintly, their covers inscribed with golden symbols that seemed to breathe. In the center of the room, a pedestal of polished moonstone stood, and upon it rested a quill silver as the first light of dawn, its tip suspended. Above an open book with blank pages that shimmered expectantly, Celine stepped beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the chamber. "This is the heart of the library," she said softly, "where all stories begin and where all forgotten dreams wait to be rewritten." Elliot's breath caught in his throat. He felt the weight of his journey pressing upon him, the doubts he had shed, the truths he had embraced. This place was the culmination of it all, the core of his own unspoken longing. "You have come far, Elliot," Celine continued. "And now the library offers you a choice. Take the eternal quill, and your story will become part of this place forever. Your words will weave into the very fabric of the library, preserved beyond time." He hesitated, eyes locked onto the quill. "And if I don't?" Celine's gaze softened. "Then you will leave this place with the knowledge you have gained. Tay, The memories will remain, but the library will fade from your grasp. You will return to the waking world, free to create your own story beyond these walls. Elliot reached out, his fingers hovering above the quill's shimmering surface. He could feel its power, a current of inspiration coursing through his veins, an entire universe waiting to be born at his touch. But something tugged at him, a quiet voice, reminding him of the bridge he had crossed, the echoes of his past self. Was he meant to stay? Or was his true path waiting beyond these walls? The bookshelves stirred, sensing his uncertainty. Pages rustled like the wind through an autumn forest, and suddenly a single book detached from the nearest shelf. It drifted towards him, opening in midair. Within its pages, he saw himself, every forgotten sketch, every abandoned idea, every moment where he had doubted his own gift. And yet, there was something else, a future not yet written, a life beyond this library where his creations could still take shape in the world outside. Elliot's heart pounded. He had spent so long believing his dreams belonged to the past that his creativity had withered beyond repair. But now, standing at the heart of magic itself, he realized the truth. His dreams had never left him. With a steady hand, he reached not for the quill, but for the book that held his unwritten future. The chamber responded with a sigh, the shifting shelves stilling as though in quiet approval. Celine watched him, her expression unreadable, but there was a glimmer of something pride, perhaps her gaze. "You have chosen well," she said. "Your story is not meant to be confined here. It is meant to be lived." Elliot closed the book gently, pressing it against his chest. The room around him began to change, the golden inscriptions fading, the glowing books dimming, as if the library itself understood that he was ready to leave. The obsidian archway brightened once more, now leading not to another chamber, but to a familiar sight, the streets of the world he had left behind. A lump formed in his throat as he turned back to Celine. "Will I ever return?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Perhaps. The library finds those who need it most. And if ever you are lost again, you may hear its whispers calling you home." Elliot took a deep breath and stepped through the archway. The moment his foot touched the ground outside, the world around him shifted. He stood in his own apartment, bathed in the quiet glow of dawn. The book remained in his hands, its cover now inscribed with his name, Elliot Carmichael. For the first time in years, he felt whole. He sat at his desk, opened a book, and picked up his own quill. The first words flowed effortlessly, as though they had been waiting all along. As he wrote, the air around him shimmered, as if a faint remnant of the library still lingered in the quiet corners of his world. And somewhere, in a place just beyond the reach of time, the library of forgotten dreams turned its pages once more, waiting for the next lost soul to find its way home. And so, Elliot's journey through the library of forgotten dreams comes to an end. Yet, the magic he discovered will forever linger in the quiet corners of a soul. Perhaps, just like Elliot, we all carry forgotten dreams waiting to be awakened. Maybe, one day, when the moment is right, you too will hear the whispers of a hidden library calling your name. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more enchanting bedtime tales. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Elliot's journey and if you've ever felt the pull of a forgotten dream. Thank you for listening, and may your night be filled with wonder and restful sleep. Until next time.